lunatics called the House of Murphy.
Well, let me tell you.
During the 1850s, a grim and weathered prison guard drags a filthy, smelly old man named Willie through the plaza toward a guillotine set up in public view. A small crowd has gathered, murmuring and watching with mixed feelings of fear, disgust, and curiosity. Willie has been condemned to death after being accused of both murder and grave-robbing crimes that have stirred fear and outrage in the town. Without delay, the guard places Willie's frail body onto the wooden platform and secures him in position. Tension fills the air as the executioner steps forward. A moment later, the guillotine blade drops, slicing through Willie's neck with swift finality. The crowd gasps, and the square falls into a tense silence. Only a few days later, Willie's young apprentice, a boy named Arthur, is brought forth to face a similar fate. He too has been sentenced to death, accused of helping and abetting Willie's criminal activities. As Arthur prepares for his final moments, a priest solemnly arrives to hear his last confession. The priest declares that Arthur's final words will be remembered as a warning to all who might break the law in the future. The priest announces Arthur's guilt in murder and grave robbery, sealing his fate. He then offers Arthur the chance to speak. Arthur calmly, but firmly, proclaims that while both he and Willie were indeed guilty of robbing graves, they were not murderers. According to him, the authorities only found trails of fresh body parts leading back to their homes, which led to false conclusions. Arthur is convinced they were framed by someone with malicious intent. The priest seems unconvinced but chooses to focus on the grave robbing rather than the murder. He presses Arthur to explain the truth about their involvement. Arthur hesitates. He fears the priest won't believe what he's about to say. As a deflection, he claims he has a terrible memory. Smirking, the priest pulls out a bottle of alcohol, saying it will help Arthur remember, and that he's willing to believe every word once they've had a drink. Relieved, Arthur accepts the offer, takes a sip, and begins to recount the dark, bizarre tale of how he became entangled in a world of corpses, secrets, and the undead. The story rewinds to Arthur's childhood. His life had been marked by hardship. He lived with his overworked mother and infant sibling after their father abandoned them. His mother eventually quit her job to care for the baby, leaving young Arthur desperate to find work. A pub owner, noticing his desperation, connected him with Willie, a decision that would shape the rest of his life. Willie introduced Arthur to the unsettling business of grave robbing. He taught the boy how to dig up graves, open coffins, and extract corpses so they could sell them for money. Arthur vividly recalls the overwhelming stench of death as he opened his first coffin. Barely able to stand the smell, he still tied the corpse with rope so Willie could pull it out. To Arthur's horror, the body inside belonged to his neighbor. Seeing Arthur's distress, Willie tried to comfort him with a pat on the shoulder and some awkward encouragement. After completing the job, Willie suddenly threatened to kill Arthur in order to sell his body, but in a strange moment of mercy, he changed his mind. This, Arthur believes, is proof that Willie wasn't truly a murderer, just a man trying to survive in filthy and desperate conditions. The priest then asks Arthur how long he had been working in the trade. Arthur answers that they didn't choose to stay in the business. They were forced to continue because of a certain doctor who had been purchasing the corpses. The doctor kept increasing his demands for more bodies and eventually threatened them with legal action if they failed to deliver. When local cemeteries ran dry, Arthur and Willie had to get creative. In one shocking memory, Arthur decides to steal the body of his own aunt. During her wake, he attends the wake, pretending to grieve so convincingly that it causes others to awkwardly laugh. He then asks to be alone with her, locks the door behind him, and ties her body with a rope to sneak it out. He and Willie successfully escape and deliver the corpse to the pub, where the doctor is scheduled to pick it up. The pub owners warn them that they're gaining an infamous reputation, but Willie explains they have no choice. The doctor is blackmailing them. If they stop delivering corpses, he'll turn them in. The doctor eventually shows up and demands even more body. He confesses that he's using the corpses for unethical experiments, and threatens to send the ruthless Murphy gang after them if they fail. Frightened for their lives, Arthur and Willie become the doctor's unwilling servants for years. They are barely paid, constantly living in fear of death. Eventually, the doctor's demands grow darker. He orders them to retrieve corpses that have mysteriously reanimated zombies. Arthur describes his first encounter with one of these undead beings, saying it left him forever wary of dead body. He doubts the priest will believe his story, but to his surprise, the priest says he already knows. The priest reveals that he bribed the guards just to speak with Arthur privately, driven by curiosity about his experience with the undead. Arthur jokingly asks if the priest always pays to be alone with men. The priest doesn't find the joke amusing. He presses Arthur for more information and speculates that Willie introduced him to the zombie black market. Arthur clarifies that they stumbled upon it together. In another memory, the pub owner takes them to a strange grave outside the cemetery. Willie suspects the body inside was excommunicated, perhaps a suicide victim. Arthur removes a layer of garlic and pulls out a knife embedded in the corpse. As they prepare to cart the body away, it suddenly disappears. They panic and flee, only to find it weeping in the distance. Shocked, Willie runs away, abandoning Arthur. The zombie then attacks Arthur from behind. Willie returns just in time to knock it away. The creature reappears and Willie tries to strike it again, but accidentally hits Arthur. Eventually they manage to subdue the zombie by stabbing it. However, when the knife is removed, the creature starts to revive again. Willie stabs it once more to keep it unconscious. Arthur pleads to leave it alone, but Willie decides to deliver it to the doctor anyway. The doctor receives the zombie at his mansion, removes the knife, and is immediately devoured. With the doctor dead, Arthur and Willie are finally free from his threat. They soon discover that there's a growing market for zombies. People are willing to pay large sums of money for these creatures. For a time, their lives improve. They earn far more than they ever did selling ordinary corpses. Back in the present, the priest comments on how lucrative their trade became. Arthur, however, argues that it wasn't always easy. Their rivals, the Murphy gang, often interfered, sometimes stealing their zombie. The Murphys were far more ruthless and took the trade very seriously, unlike Arthur and Willie, who treated it with a strange kind of reckless humor. Arthur then recalls an encounter with an old man in a cowboy hat, known as Cowman, a dangerous member of the Murphy gang. In the memory, he and Willie arrive at a grave, only to find it frozen. While the surrounding ground is untouched, they begin digging and eventually uncover a frozen coffin. As they attempt to transport it, they drop the coffin, causing it to burst open. To their shock, it contains what looks like a frozen alien. Despite the bizarre sight, Arthur decides to carry it back to town to sell. Just then, Cowman appears and demands the alien. Terrified, Willie tells Arthur to hand it over, but Arthur refuses. He doesn't recognize Cowman and has no intention of giving up their find. The three of them begin fighting over the alien, each desperate to seize control of the rare prize. During the chaotic scuffle, the alien suddenly emits a blinding light, filling the room with an intense, otherworldly glow. Within an instant, it vanishes without a trace, leaving only the fading echo of its presence. Now, standing in the midst of the confusion and frustration, they realize that they have nothing left to sell. Their hopes and plans have crumbled in the blink of an eye. However, despite the disappointment, Cowman is oddly impressed by Arthur's bravery. He sees something in Arthur, his fearless spirit and resolve, that stands out. With a calculating smile, Cowman offers Arthur a chance to leave Willie and join the infamous Murphy gang instead. The proposition hangs in the air, tempting and dangerous. Back in the present, the priest asks if Arthur accepted the offer. Arthur's voice is filled with conviction, as he says he refused, though he confesses he did consider it at the time. The priest, intrigued, leans in, wanting to know more about the Murphy gang. Arthur's expression darkens as he begins to explain that Murphy's family comes from a long line of brutal criminals, men who have built an empire through terror and violence. The Murphy gang takes grave robbing more seriously than anyone else, using it as both a livelihood and a twisted form of art. Arthur and Willie, having seen the gang's destructive power firsthand, have done their best to stay out of their way. But everything changes when Arthur's new girlfriend, who also happens to be his apprentice, enters the picture. She is charming, seductive, and ultimately incredibly dangerous. It's revealed that the apprentice's past is far darker than anyone could have anticipated. She once worked as a wrecker, someone who lures ships to crash, so they can be looted for riches. In a flashback, Willie, Arthur, and the apprentice are seen enjoying a night at the pub. They engage in a rowdy beer drinking contest, laughing and competing for bragging. But soon the pub owner approaches them with an intriguing offer. The pub owner has received a tip from an old woman who works at the morgue. She claims that she was attacked by a zombie that crawled out of a shipping crate. Miraculously, the cross she was wearing put the zombie to sleep, saving her life. The woman also reveals that there are 2 more zombies in the crate, but the ship carrying them sank, and the crate drifted to a remote island. The pub owner adds that a group of surgeons is willing to pay an enormous sum for the 2 zombies, believing they hold the secret to immortality. However, the surgeons have already hired the Murphy gang to retrieve. Arthur and Willie are immediately disappointed. They want nothing to do with the Murphy gang and their dangerous reputation. The apprentice, curious and eager for adventure, asks who the Murphy gang is, prompting Arthur to introduce. The gang consists of Cowman, an assistant with a horrifying burnt face, and an executioner with dog-like teeth. At the very top of the hierarchy is Cowman's father, the true mastermind behind their operations, a man who operates in secret while the rest of the gang does the dirty work. Despite the dangers, the apprentice insists on taking the mission. She argues that the reward from the job would change their lives, providing the kind of wealth and freedom they've always dreamed of. But Arthur and Willie, still haunted by their past run-ins with the gang, refuse. That night, Arthur and the apprentice argue heatedly. She believes the mission is an opportunity they can't afford to miss. Arthur, however, insists that they should stick to smaller, safer jobs until they've accumulated enough to retire comfortably. She disagrees, confident that Cowman isn't as dangerous as Arthur makes him out to be. But Arthur, with a grim expression, counters by telling a chilling story from Cowman's childhood, how as a young boy Cowman ate a live rabbit in front of his father. To Arthur, this moment marked Cowman as a ruthless killer from an early age. When words fail and tensions rise, the apprentice seduces Arthur, hoping to sway him to her side. After a brief internal struggle, Arthur gives in. The next day, the three of them row across the dark, ominous sea toward the island. During the journey, Willie is reminded of his father's death. His father drowned at sea many years ago, and the thought weighs heavily on him. As if to add to the sense of foreboding, Willie accidentally drops their crucifix into the water, leaving them defenseless against any possible zombie attacks. At dawn, they reach the island, where the executioner stands guard over the zombie crowd. The apprentice, swift and merciless, slits his throat, but deliberately leaves his teeth intact, calling it an honorable death. Willie and Arthur are furious. They didn't sign up for cold-blooded murder. Willie, deeply unsettled, wants to leave the island quietly, but the apprentice insists they must retrieve the zombies. When they open one of the crates, they find only a decaying foot. Suddenly, a zombie bursts out of the crate and attacks Willie. The zombie sinks its teeth into Willie's body. The apprentice manages to kick the creature back into the cage and locks it, but it's already too late. Willie is injured. At that moment, Cowman and the assistant arrive, and the situation quickly turns deadly. Cowman, furious, throws a knife at the apprentice, killing her instantly. He ties up Willie and Arthur, intending to sell them as corpses to the highest bidder. Arthur, desperate, tries to deceive Cowman by pretending to accept his earlier offer, but Cowman, his face contorted with rage, refused. He's enraged that an amateur grave robber like Arthur would dare defy the Murphy gang, a group that takes pride in their deadly and meticulous work. As a cruel warning, Cowman orders his assistant to reveal her grotesque, burned face. The horrific sight shocks both Arthur and Willie, but unexpectedly, it also enrages the caged zombie. The creature breaks free and attacks the assistant. Cowman tries to intervene, but before he can do anything, the second zombie joins the fray. In the ensuing chaos, the zombies overwhelm and devour both Cowman and his assistant. With the threat gone, Willie and Arthur manage to escape the island. Back at the pub, they argue Willie believes Arthur betrayed him by even considering Cowman's offer. Just as they're about to reconcile, tragedy strikes. Willie is executed a few days later, a victim of the very system they had tried to escape. In the present, Arthur finds himself in a similar position on the brink of execution. Just as the noose is being tightened around his neck, the priest reveals a shocking truth. He is the mastermind behind the Murphy gang. He framed Arthur and Willie, manipulating events to avenge his son Cowman's death. The priest declares he will torture Arthur to death, his anger boiling over. When Arthur mocks Cowman's death, the priest flies into a blind rage and begins beating him savagely. But just as all hope seems lost, a miracle occurs. Zombie Willie, resurrected by the bite he suffered earlier, emerges from the shadows. In a split second, he kills the priest with a single brutal strike, and frees Arthur from his chains. He hands Arthur the key to his cell, allowing both of them to escape. The two of them, now reconciled and bound by a shared fate, make their way into the world once again, their friendship stronger than ever. In the final scene, the camera lingers on the grave of Cowman, where his zombified body rises from the earth, his eyes burning with an insatiable hunger for revenge.